Hey everyone, and welcome back to AWS Nordics Office Hours every Monday live here right at Twitch. My name is Gunnar Grosch. I am a developer advocate for AWS. And every week I bring on AWS experts to talk about a specific topic and let you, our viewers, ask any questions you might have. And this week, I am joined by Andreas Lindh. Andreas is a specialist solutions architect for containers at AWS. Welcome to the show, Andreas.
Hey, Gunnar. Thanks for having me. Again, second time I'm here.
This is second time. What did we talk about last time?
Last time we spoke about EKS in Kubernetes, involving a few demos on how to deploy Flux to get your GitOps going with CDK.
But
and
this time,
I believe we had some fun with a demo playing the old game Doom running in Kubernetes as well.
Yeah, that's right, and destroying pods by.
Correct,
playing Doom, that's right.
Correct.
This time we're not going to play Doom, I believe. Instead, we're going to look at a new service, AWS App Runner. So let's just take it from the beginning, Andreas, to talk about what App Runner is. But before that, if you have any questions, just post them in the chat as usual, and we'll get to your questions throughout the show. Don't worry if we don't answer your questions straight away. We'll try to get the question where they are relevant in the flow of the show. So just post your questions for Andreas or for me in the chat. All right, Andreas, what is AWS App Runner?
Yeah, so what's AWS App Runner? AWS App Runner, I can actually go and show a couple of slides to kind of illustrate what it is and what it does for you as a customer. And it's going to be very, very few slides. I don't want to bore the chat and our live viewers with PowerPoint access. And then we're going to go into running through a little bit of an App Runner workshop and actually see what it looks like to use the service. But yeah, to your question, Gunnar, what is AWS App Runner? If you put yourself in the shoes of a developer or a development team that want to go ahead and run their, in this case, a Node.js backend server and a web application, and you want to run that on AWS with containers, you have some kind of application already built. You need to go, or previously needed to go through a number of different steps. If you want to run this containerized app on let's say Fargate down here, you needed to configure your task definitions and your service definitions in ECS. You need to connect elastic load balancing, an application load balancer or network load balancer to your service in ECS. Go and configure AWS autoscaling to ensure that you have the right resources as your application needs them. And you also have to have some kind of service to actually build your code and to move it into a container, build a container, and then so that you have a deployable artifact. With the AWS App Runner, that kind of changes. We remove a lot of the heavy lifting involved with doing this. So AWS App Runner takes care of all of those steps for you. So the only thing that you need to bring to the service to get your application up and running is your code or a pre-built image. And we're going to look at both of these scenarios throughout the session today.
So just a question there. We often talk about that 90% of what we build is things that customers are asking us for. 10% are things that, well, perhaps they don't even know that they want yet. Is this part of the 90%, something that customers have asked us for?
I'd say that this is definitely part of the 90%. Simplifying this experience is something that I tend to hear a bit of, and especially from startups and customers who want to use the breadth of service that we have, but initially just want to get started with running an existing application, migrating an existing application without having to learn everything about ECS, everything about elastic load balancing.
Cool.
So good question, Gunnar. So yeah, with AWS App Runner, you don't have to necessarily think about network servers, pipelines, or orchestrators such as ECS or EKS, and you can deploy your code directly from GitHub or from ECR, Elastic Container Registry. And the pricing is as you go. So boring stuff out of the way. This is kind of what we'll be doing today. We'll be putting on the shoes of a development team. We're going to use a sample application. It's super simple little Python Flask app that sits in a source code repository. And we're going to take both the upper path here to actually go ahead and deploy our application, and also the lower path here, where we take our source code, we build our own image, and we push that to that container image to ECR, and we finally deploy directly from ECR. So that's what we'll be doing today. And we will be basing our little exercise on the apprunnerworkshop.com and a specific section I'm going to show, which section we're going to use when we get into that. So if you're following along in chat, or if you're doing it on your own, this is the URL, and I bet Gunnar is putting it on chat right now. I just can't see the screen. That we're going to be basing our exercise on. If you want more information on App Runner, this is the URL. We're going to post these later as well, and we'll get back to the public roadmap at the end of the section. So that said, Gunnar, if you or chat doesn't have any questions, I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, and let's jump into moving our super simple Python Flask app into App Runner.
Yeah,
does that sound good?
Yeah, for sure. Just a question on the two different paths you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
You see the second path where you you build your container image yourself. Is that a way of perhaps taking what you already run, a container that you might have built already, to just simply get that into App Runner?
Absolutely. Or if you have like an existing pipeline that already builds that, your application and produce as a container image in ECR, it's pretty much. We're going to see how easy it is to get going with in a bit. You point App Runner to that ECR repository, and App Runner takes the image and goes and deploys it in AWS for you.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing that. All right, then let's jump into the workshop. And reminder, just post your questions in the chat, and feel free to follow along with the workshop. Posted the links in the chat, as Andreas said.
Awesome. So as with any cooking show, I've done a little bit of prep. I've gone and created my my Cloud9 instance. And if you're looking at the workshop, that's part of the starter workshop. So here we set up permissions for Cloud9 and our Cloud9 environment. And that's essentially the only things that I've done before starting this workshop. So I'm not going to run through that today, but if you're following along and want to do it using Cloud9, this is the section for you in the starter workshop. For folks watching and who wants to test out their workshop, there's two sections to it. It's the Getting Started with AWS App Runner. That section shows you how you can it gives you a couple of examples, just copy pasting a few JavaScript snippets into a repository you create on GitHub, and you deploy that using App Runner. We're going to take a different route. We're going to do the section that's called Working with Other AWS Services today. And I clicked it, and now it has loaded. Our demo app is, as I said earlier, it's a Python Flask app. It goes out based on the URL slug that we provide. It goes out and queries metadata information from GitHub for a specific repository. Just number of stargazers, number of forks, stuff like that. And to interact with other AWS services, this data is cached in Dynamodb. So that's kind of what we want to show here, how you can use the two together. Cool. So
let's get to it.
Let's get cooking. So the repository sits here right now. The sample app. It's a very, very, hope this is visible, super simple Flask app. I'm not going to go through all of the different, or the very few, to be honest, different components of the app. But the key is here, if we append /repo slug, the app is going to go out and query GitHub, and it will cache the results in a Dynamodb table that it will use as a primary source for data. If it's cached and has a TTL attribute to make sure that the items are cached on a limited amount of time and all that stuff, but not important today. We're going to focus on App Runner itself. So first step is to clone the repository or fork the repository. It sits under my my GitHub profile here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clone the repository in my Cloud9 instance here. So if I do a git clone, actually I need to use HTTPS. So let's just do that. Copy link location, git. And we can see that we have now cloned our repository into our Cloud9 instance. I'm going to jump straight to the next step because we already talked about what's in the repo. And in this section, we are going to have a quick peek at our prereqs Dynamodb template. Sorry, the CloudFormation template. So in this template, we set up the table. Otherwise, the Dynamodb table. Otherwise, the application wouldn't have anywhere to actually store its cached information. And we do set up an IAM role with an inline policy that allows. This is the important part of the IAM role. Really, is that the principal tasks.apprunner.amazon.aws.com is allowed to assume the role and perform these Dynamo actions on the table, and on the table resource is scoped to just the table layer, and that's what we're creating. So in short, we're going to use CloudFormation to spin up a empty Dynamodb table and a corresponding IAM role that will allow App Runner tasks access to that Dynamodb table. Right. So DynamoDBs.
So really nothing about App Runner besides setting the permissions for App Runner to be able to access the table.
Correct. So let's do that. Let's jump into our repository, and I'm just going to copy and paste this. Let's just validate that I have credentials. Get caller identity. Cool, I can. So
are you a Cloud9 user otherwise, Andreas, or is it just for demo purposes?
Actually, a bit of both.
Yeah.
So personally, I use it. Like for my side projects and stuff like that, where I want to be able to switch between computers and my iPad. Actually, I tried that on my iPad as well. But for work, I'm mostly using it for demo purposes. But
pretty much the same for me.
It's actually really impressive at times how smooth you can transition between computers and still maintain your same dev environment and just get access to it. It's pretty neat. And while we wait for the command to execute, we can have a quick look at the CloudFormation console. And I hope, as chats and live viewers, please let me know if the font size is just right, too large, or too small, and I'll adjust accordingly. There we go. So that's my stack, and that's actually create complete. Right. So we can see that we have an IAM role and a Dynamodb table. And resizing this back so it's equally sized, and back to our workshop. So prereqs are pretty much done. Let's go ahead and deploy from GitHub. So again, the repository sits in GitHub here. So we're going to go to the App Runner console. And I love how this looks when you have zoomed at 170%. This is not exactly similar to the screenshot in the workshop, but or it's similar, but it's not the same. We're going to go ahead and create an App Runner service. And for the workshop, we're going to connect to, for the first part of the workshop, I said, we're going to connect to GitHub. So let's jump into that step. In this little pre-baked account here, I've already set up my GitHub connection. So App Runner needs access to GitHub so that it can actually read from private repositories and stuff like that. Mine is public, but otherwise we would have, we're going to see that we need to set that up.
And in this step is where you choose either to take it from a source code repo or from a container registry.
Correct. So it defaults to container registry, and as you see, as soon as I click source code repository, I get this little connect to GitHub prompt here. I've already created my connection. So similar to how CodeStar works, you set up a connection to GitHub, and it then can see my repositories, and I can select which repository and which branch I'm going to use. So I'm going to use repo status -gh demo, and I'm going to use my demo branch here so I can fiddle around with it for Twitch and without ruining the main branch. And you can see that, sorry, I clicked too fast. No, I didn't. We're effectively mimicking what we're doing here in the workshop. So we're going to also specify deployment settings. So we're going to say automatic. So every single time we push new code to this repository, it will be built and it will be deployed automatically by App Runner. So specify next here. App Runner does support bringing your own config file as part of your repository via the a file called apprunner.yaml. We're not going to use that today. We're going to configure everything from the console just to kind of walk through how it looks like and what to do. So this is a Flask app. So we're going to select Python 3 as a runtime. We're going to define our build commands. And we're going to define the start command. So I have this predefined here. I'm a big fan of pipenv for my Python project. So I'm using pipenv to manage my dependencies. And we also want our start command so that when the containers in App Runner actually go to start, they're executing this command to make sure that the app is up and running, or start app. And finally, we specify the port, and we're going to use the default of 8080 here because that's what we've specified in our Flask run command.
So when the containers start, they're going to start a Flask service on port 8080, and you've defined that you're going to use port 8080. So is that for Correct. The load balancing part then?
Correct. So that's what the load balancer will be directing traffic to in the backend.
Yep.
So this is the port that's exposed from your app. And once everything is set up, we're going to get a URL from App Runner that we can go and access directly. So we're going to see how that all works in just a bit. So we're selecting next. We're going to give our service a name. We'll call it App Runner Workshop app Twitch. Here we specify for each compute instance or unit how much virtual CPU and memory we want, and if we want to add any environment variables that our app will get access to during runtime. I'm just going to leave the false because obviously this is not a very, oops, I did. I scrolled on my mouse sideways. So I went back and I lost all my progress here. Okay, I'll be really quick to just.
Yeah, no worries. In the meantime, there are a couple of questions we can address, I think. A question from Gert. Can you configure test scripts during build configuration? And how would you know if it fails?
You couldn't execute the make file or just make from the build command and have that fan out to your tests and then finally build it. So failure would be, we're gonna have a look at how you can see. We're not gonna show failures, but we're gonna see how you can get the outputs and the information from your builds. As soon as I've gone back and redone what I've just discarded accidentally here.
All right.
So let's do pip install requirements. So it's pip install pip env, and then we want Flask run. Here we go. And I'm staying far away from my little horizontal scroll wheel on my mouse. App Runner Workshop app. Just to show this in this little section here on configure service phase or stage, we can go and configure our custom auto scaling if we want to. So by default, we have a concurrency of 100 requests per compute unit. And we have minimum size of 1 and maximum size of 25. We can go ahead and configure this as we see best fit for our application. So let's say I have a highly optimized app that can, using 1 vCPU and 2 gigs of RAM, I can serve 500 concurrent requests. I can go and reconfigure this to a different value. So this is part of the optimization step. Once you get your application up and running in production, look at the metrics and understand how you can better tune the auto scaling over time. But we don't have to do that right now. We're going to go with the default auto scaling configuration. We can specify our preferred changes to how TCP health checking of the containers work. Also, for the purpose of the workshop and today, we're going to just leave as is. Here, however, in the security section, this is important because we're going to use DynamoDB. So we're going to tell App Runner, go ahead and use the role. This is the role that we created using CloudFormation earlier. So we're going to tell App Runner to go and use that instance role so it can actually call out to Dynamo. And I click next. And this is just a little bit of a review that I configured stuff correctly. Hopefully this time around I have. And boom, here we go. Sorry, I'm just going to make this a little bit larger for everyone to see. So now we can see that our service, App Runner Workshop.app, have status operation in progress. So we're currently creating the service. We've already gotten our domain that we're going to be able to use in a bit to actually access our application. And what's happening now is that it's taking the source, it's building it according to our build command into a container, packaging it up, and it's going to go ahead and deploy it into App Runner. And to the question earlier, you can follow along the logs from deployments, applications, and events from the console here. They are stored in CloudWatch logs, so you can actually go to CloudWatch logs and query them as well.
All right. We also had a question from Advishnu. Can we use Dockerfile?
That would be tailored more to the second leg of the workshop that we're going to do, where we build ourselves, right? So if you have a Docker file, you probably already have a process for building it, building your container image, and then once it's built and pushed to ECR, to a container registry, you want it to be deployed into App Runner. So we're going to see that in 10 minutes, maybe, I wish.
So the answer is yes, we can use it with App Runner, but not when we're deploying it this way. Correct.
Repo. So going back to, I hope I have my, So right now, at which we're working from our source code repository. We're building the application using App Runner, and we're deploying it into App Runner. Once we're done with this and showed how we automatically looked at how we automatically can take changes in the code, we're going to go the lower path here. We have our source code repository. We're going to use our Docker file, just build it, and then we're going to push the image and see how App Runner picks it up and deploys it automatically for us.
Cool. We also had a question on CDK availability from Cloudcrawler. Can you use App Runner with CDK?
I don't know top of my head, actually. I should probably check that out before the session. If there's App Runner does have CloudFormation support. So I'm not sure if there's low-level constructs for the CDK already built.
Well, something we can probably get back to that question then, perhaps.
Indeed.
Right. So if you just joined us, this is the AWS Nordics Office Hours with me, Gunnar Grosch, and I am joined this week by Andreas Lindh. We are taking a look at the new service, AWS App Runner. And Andreas is walking us through two different ways of deploying applications using App Runner. So we are well within the first version of deploying from basically from a GitHub repo, having a simple Flask app and using some downstream services, in this case, Dynamodb.
And to the question about App Runner, so can I put this directly in chat, by the way? I probably can, right? So here's a link to, here you can find the docs for how to use it with CloudFormation at least. So it has CloudFormation support from day one, which is nice, I think.
If you copy that link and send it to me, I can post it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the right there.
Thank you.
Cool. So let's see how our app deployment is doing here. All right. So provision progress, performing health check, provisioning instance, deploying image. Seems like we're chugging along here. And we should pretty soon be able to access our deployed application.
And comparing this to other container services then from AWS, we haven't really touched that much on the infrastructure level when you've just gone through this wizard. It's
Correct.
Basically pointing to the source, doing some settings on how we want, the size of, what's it called, instances in App Runner?
Exactly. Think of the instance of like the scaling unit. So an instance supports, in the default configuration here, 100 concurrent requests. And if that threshold is reached and we want to scale out, another instance like it is provisioned. Or another container like it, I should say. Okay.
Yeah.
And while we're chatting, Gunnar, we have our service running.
Cool.
So if DNS permits me, that's typically one of the biggest challenges when showing this stuff live is that DNS propagates slowly. But hey, it seems like we're actually able to hit our app. I'm going to make this size huge. So this is just in the index page. And as we said, we need to hit /repo/slug of a GitHub repository so that we go out and get the data. So if I go to this URL /AWS container/App Runner Workshop, which is where the App Runner Workshop actually sits, AWS containers, App Runner Workshop. It has 4 stargazers. Yeah, makes sense. Watchers count, actually 11. Is this probably my bad code in that case? Or are we looking at different watchers? Anywho, this non-relevant. Our app is running, my code is crap. I'm not surprised. So let's go ahead and introduce a change to our app, right? This is bold. We think it's a little bit too bold. We want it to be a little bit more nice formatted. So we're going to go ahead and actually do the edit directly on the GitHub repository here and see how App Runner picks it up. And let me put the App Runner console right here on the side. So the template that we saw, it's rendered from, the page that we saw is rendered using one of the templates here. Actually, this template where we have a bold HTML tag. We think it's too much. We need to introduce a new change to our app. So let's go ahead and do that. And remember that in the App Runner app that we configured, we pointed it to a specific branch in our repo. That's the demo branch, as you can see here, and that's where we're going to push our change. So let's swap the entire thing from bold to, let's just use repository name. It's the only thing we want, bold. Looks about right. Let's make it italic instead. Also, I mean, it gets really, really pretty. Commit message, I'm just going to use the default one, and I'm going to commit directly to the demo branch. So that's what we want to see. We want to make sure that once this is deployed, all of this text should no longer be bold. We should have bold italic only on that part. And if we refresh our service here on the dashboard for our service in the App Runner console, we see that, hey, the status has actually changed to operation in progress. So it's already picked up our change because it's watching the branch that we specified. And it has started a new build and a new deployment.
All right, cool. So in this case, it will only, or how does it make this change to our application? Let me phrase the question that way. It's just a small change to an HTML document in the repo.
Yeah. So what happens is that a new build is triggered based on the build command that we specified for the service. So a new version of the underlying container is triggered, a new version of our application. And App Runner is going to deploy our new version of the application. It's going to make sure that it's up and running and healthy. And then it's going to shift our traffic and tear down the old version.
How does it make that switch? Is it does it as soon as it can see that it is healthy, that it is up and running, it will switch all traffic to the new version of the service?
That's correct. So it's going to do it in a blue-green fashion.
Okay.
Very much.
Cool.
So we can see that our new deployment has started here. We can click it and sorry, wrong click. I meant to go to the event logs. And while we wait for the service, by the way, to go ahead and roll out our new version of the application, I would like to encourage folks to, as you try it out, as you try out the service, I'm going to put the link here to you in the chat, Gunnar. And maybe you encounter things that you want to see in service or are curious when they show up in service. App Runner does have a public roadmap on GitHub that's available under the AWS org/App Runner roadmap. And I believe Gunnar is working his keyboard to get it into chat as you go. So please, if you find issues, or features that you want to see, go ahead and give a thumbs up if the issues already exist in the repository covering the feature. If there's anything that's not there, don't hesitate to go and create a new issue and state your request.
Yeah, I think this is great, having public roadmaps. The container team or the container teams have really been pushing that for the entirety of AWS. So I really like that. So do use the roadmap if you see things that, well, existing features that you want to highlight, or add new features if you find things within the service. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome way to track if it's something that you're waiting for to get rolled out, or you can see in the container roadmap, for example, different labels indicating where we are with it and so forth. So, and also a really nice way to just go ahead and click subscribe on that issue that you're tracking and get email updates when it progresses or changes.
Yeah. All right. So where are we in our deployment process now?
Let's see. Let's go ahead and hit refresh on our app. Did that not happen? Let's hit refresh in the browser.
I think the stream is eating up your bandwidth at the moment. So.
Both bandwidth and CPU, probably.
All right.
It's still working.
All right. Still in progress. So cool. We have a question which might take you long enough to answer for that operation to finish. And that is the difference between App Runner and Elastic Beanstalk. I think you anticipated this question.
Yeah, I think it's something that does come up, and there's a few differences. App Runner focuses on the simplicity of getting your code into production, similar to Beanstalk. Beanstalk, however, gives you a few more capabilities when it comes to tuning your deployment settings and choosing EC2 instance types. So with Beanstalk, you have to consider that. With App Runner, this is all abstracted away from you. You don't have to think about EC2 instance families, and instance numbers, and so forth. You configure how many requests each container can manage, and App Runner does all the scaling for you. So it's really, I think App Runner is a way more developer-focused service, easier to get started with than Beanstalk. Beanstalk gives you a little bit more flexibility, choosing different load balancer types depending on your application, what your needs are. If you're getting started today, I think App Runner is definitely what I would use. If I have a piece of code I wanted to get it up and running in AWS, App Runner is a super simple way of getting to that point.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well. All right. Is it done?
Yeah, it's running. Cool. So if I go ahead and I'm going to hit a hard refresh on this. You told me to go off VPN. Maybe I should have stayed on VPN.
I don't know. So
repo actually is demo.
you're blaming me for your bad code, Andreas.
It's probably my bad code, to be honest. Let's go ahead and explore the application logs.
Yeah.
Please.
While Andreas looks confused, post your questions in the chat if you have any.
That's just my standard look, Gunnar.
All right. Sorry. While Andreas looks as he normally does, please ask your questions in the chat. If you have any questions around AWS App Runner or other container type questions.
Let's go to the log groups and have a look at our service logs. Sorry, application logs. Which application log are we looking at? That's a better link.
I don't think we've had live debugging on the show before, so
you never know what you're going to get when you invite me, Gunnar.
no.
So let's see. It's very, very likely that it's my bad code that is the source for this issue. I mean, as we can see, when we go to the section of my Flask app that doesn't actually perform any calls to the GitHub API, we get a response. So the service is working. That's probably something with my my calls out to the GitHub API, I would imagine. Let's go and look at logs and log insights real quick and see if there's anything we can find. Otherwise, we can form a rollback and see how our rollback works.
Yeah. Yeah, since it worked on the first version before your updates, was there any syntax error in the update you did?
Probably not. It's deployed and it's happy, or not happy, not the subpath at least. Where are we time-wise? We're at 42, so 39. So this probably needs to propagate. Let's roll back our change. Let's go ahead and edit this again and see if we. Let's do this.
Yes, go ahead.
We're going to go ahead and edit the index page. Make sure that we can at least get the visual representation of that something new is deployed. So unless my HTML tags are really, really funky or bad characters sneaking in, this should give a change to the visual appearance of this. And while that deploys, instead of waiting for that to build and deploy, should we have a quick peek on how the workflow, what it looks like if I have a container, if I want to build my own container?
Yes, let's do that. In the meantime, I've posted a couple of links in the chat as well. And once again, the link to this workshop if you want to try out App Runner yourself in an easy way. All right, so the second path then.
Yeah, so the second path, we're going to go ahead and create ECR repository, Elastic Container Registry repository. For our App Runner app, we're going to use Cloud9, which is right here, and build our application ourselves. So someone asked earlier, what if I have a Docker file? What if I want to already have a build process in place? Maybe you're have existing code build, you're using GitHub Actions or something like that. So let's create a repository using this command. So we're asking ECR to create a repository. And I need to specify region, US 1. There we go. Not been signed out. Lovely. It's my browser is having a Monday, I think. Let me just go ahead and sign into this console.
One of those days.
One of those days. Okay, here we go. So in Elastic Container Registry, we should be able to see that we now have, this is expired as well. As our repository. So this is empty right now. It's just an empty repository without any images in it. So what we're going to do is that we are going to, first off, we're going to set a few environment variables that we're going to be using later. So we want our ECR repository URI, and we want a region. So let's do AWS region, export AWS region. There we go. Happy, and let's make sure we have ECR as, yeah, so that's correct now. So that's the URI for the container image that we're gonna push in a bit. So let's set our count ID. Let's we don't need that right now. We do need that count ID. Set that, and we're gonna use this command, AWS ECR get login password, to generate a token that we're gonna use that our Docker engine on the Cloud9 instance here can use to actually push the image that we're building. There we go, login succeeded. And we have a Docker file already. So as we can see here, this uses a base image Python 3.8 from public ECR gallery. Same commands as we used in our App Runner service configuration earlier, and finally a command to actually run the Flask app. So let's go ahead and build it. Build our little container image. It's lovely how this text is red. Feels like it's going to be an error here, but there's no error. It's just pip and color choices, I guess.
So when the first path that we looked at, would you say that that's a likely path if you don't really care about the details for how you build or how you actually create your images?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you have an existing Flask app, or if you have a Node.js application that fits one of the runtimes that App Runner supports, Python app, I should say, because it's not Flask specific, then that's absolutely the easiest way to get that into a container image and into deployed into an App Runner service.
So let me ask a question that we perhaps should have talked about before, but what if I start out with the first path and then want to switch to the second one? How would I go about doing that? Is that setting up a new service using the other path, or is there a way of changing it?
That's a good question. You'd need to create a new service and deploy that and switch over probably your DNS name change. Just do this DNS switch over, and once you have that deployed and running and your traffic is there, remove the old service from your DNS records, and traffic should be shifted over, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
So we have built our image locally. So if I do Docker images, App Runner workshop app, tag it, and then finally we're gonna push it. This is not the smallest container image. You should probably try to make them even slimmer as a best practice. And while that's pushing, I don't know why this is, my browser or my something is having a bad case of the Mondays. Let's go back. There we go. Okay, it's pushed while my browser was acting up. We should see that we have an image in ECR in the repository right here with an image tag. Great. Let's go ahead and configure our new App Runner service. That's going to be based on the images we built. For this, we need to provide access to ECR for App Runner. So we need to create an IAM role that will allow App Runner to get and describe images, as we can see here. So let's do that in our App Runner workshop here. I'm just going to give it a name. So the name of role is going to be App Runner Workshop Access Role. And if you're paying attention, you can see that there's a different principle. So the service that we're allowing access in this case is build.AppRunner, not tasks.AppRunner. So we need the build component of AppRunner to be able to access the ECR image to be able to code it. So creating our role. The role is created. And we're gonna get and apply a managed policy that we're going to attach to the role. Great, so we have get download URL for layer, batch get images, describe images, get authorization token, batch check layer availability, actions allowed for our build.AppRunner at AmazonAWS.com. And attached. Cool. Now we can go ahead and create our App Runner service that will be pointing at our ECR repository. So similar here, go ahead and create a service, select container registry, Amazon ECR, because it sits in my ECR repository. I can go ahead and browse, and I can see that this is the repository I created earlier. I'm going to select the image tag that we specified during the build of the image, called demo. Select automatic deployments. So anytime a new image is pushed to that specific tag, image and tag, it's going to be deployed into my service. If you are using a practice where you don't overwrite container image tags, so if you don't have tag, :dem or tag production, you need to update the service to point to another version of the tag. So v1.2 or whatever versioning format you're following. When I select container registry in ECR, I get prompted for an ECR access role. So that's I could have created a new service role here from the console. I'm going to use the one we created from CLI. Hit next. And the same familiar App Runner workshop container, or let's call it ECR, because we're using ECR. Show size for my containers. I could supply additional configuration. I'm not going to do that because I have it built into my Docker file already. Same things with auto-scaling, health checks that we looked at earlier. And I'm going to select the role that will allow access to Dynamo. Click next, and that's it. Create and deploy. And App Runner will spin up containers, create load balancing, create a domain for you that you can access your service on. I went a little bit fast on this section because I realized that we have 6 minutes left to the hour.
But everything is in the workshop as well.
Yeah.
So if people want to dive deeper into it, everything is described there as well. So I think this is really cool, being able to use it with ECR, and I can immediately think of, well, perhaps you already have your container images in ECR. You can easily just get them up and running using App Runner in this case. Now, what you did was you went through setting up ECR. You also created your first image and so on. But you could easily just go to this wizard, start a new service, point it to an existing image, as long as you have the IAM role that is allowed to fetch it or get it.
And we did this 2 times in less than an hour.
Yeah,
to be fair, which I think is pretty cool.
That's
App Runner
really
also
cool.
comes with so the Copilot CLI. Can deploy App Runner apps if you are already a Copilot CLI user. You can do that.
4 sentences on Copilot CLI.
So Copilot CLI, 4 sentences. Can I do one really long one?
Yeah.
So Copilot CLI is a pretty awesome way to get your code from command line and from your local computer into containers on AWS, ECS or App Runner, depending on what service type you specify. So it sets up all of the requirements for you, but still gives you access to it. So remember the slide I showed earlier, where you have, how do I PowerPoint? So there we go. So all of these components, the load balancing, your ECS task definitions, service configurations, auto scaling, all of these bits and bobs, it can help you orchestrate the infrastructure for that using a few CLI commands. So yeah, nice. You already put the link in chat. I was just about to ask you to.
Cool. So we have a question also. I see that one of our viewers has replied to it, but let me just get your take on that. What is the benefit of deploying applications in containers, from Father Goblin?
So one of the primary things that I think is really nice is the consistency, right? You have one artifact and one consistent environment across your different environments. You don't have the misconfigured Puppet manifests or Chef config management stuff in different servers here and there. You kind of force yourself into decoupling the app from the underlying infrastructure in that sense.
Yeah.
So.
And if you want to get started using containers on AWS, I guess now we point people to App Runner as the easiest way of getting started using containers.
Absolutely. It's definitely the easiest way. And if you're coming from a place where you have an app already that you want to get deployed, the upper path on the slide I showed here that we did in the first section, just connecting App Runner to your GitHub repository. It's a really easy way of getting started. If you want to apply customizations, like you asked earlier, Gunnar, how do I then move from this path to the lower path? Create your own Docker file, add the customizations to what you want in your image in that Docker file, and point the App Runner to the built image.
And then we got the question again about the difference between Elastic Beanstalk and App Runner. So just a quick answer to that once again.
So the quick answer to that question is try to not be too wishy-washy with it, but App Runner provides an even higher level of abstraction, making things even simpler. So you don't have to consider which EC2 instance type do I use, which type of load balancer do I use. You bring your code, you specify the run command for your code and the build command for your code, and App Runner handles setting up health checks, load balancing, auto scaling, vanity domain name or the default domain name here, and then you can add your custom domain as you see fit afterwards.
All right. And with that, I think it's time to wrap up. Just a few seconds to go. So Andreas, thank you very much for joining us again, and this time to talk about AWS App Runner. Thanks to all the viewers and for your questions. And with that, thank you all very much. Bye-bye.